Mu slowly let out a murky breath. This news was simply too astonishing to him, making him unable to digest it in an instant. Even though the Empire's Grand Chancellor was a lower third-ranking official and didn't seem to be very high, the position was simply too important. Imperial College governed all the techniques and divine arts in the world, to select and edit them into scrolls. It could be said that it was the sacred grounds of martial arts and divine arts, a place of supreme learning. Furthermore, Eternal Peace Empire's officials were all from Imperial College, and every person who walked out of here was a student of the young patriarch. There was camaraderie as a master and disciples between the young patriarch and the students. This official position was not high, but its bully pulpit was just powerful. Adding the hidden identity of the young patriarch into consideration, now that was very terrifying. Fu Qingyun continued, "Since young master has come here, why don't you rest for a few days and find another day to go to Imperial College? However, if young master wanted to enter Imperial College, you will have to pass some tests." Mu was bewildered. What kind of test? Imperial College is not a place anyone could just enter. You have to become an Imperial scholar before you can enter. Fu Qingyun smiled. Patriarch's wish naturally is that young master has to become an Imperial scholar first. The examinations for Imperial scholars will soon begin. Young master will sit for the examinations with the other scholars from around the world. Once you complete the examinations, you will be able to enter. Much thanks, Sister Yuner. Mu gave a sigh of relief and smiled. I haven't found a place to stay yet, so I'll stay here at Sister Yuner's place for a few days. Fu Qingyun whispered. It's not that young master can't stay here, you'll have to guard against the few little hussies here. They have lots of intention and can't wait to climb over my head to become the cult mistress. Mu's face turned bright red and mumbled. There's actually this sort of thing? Fu Qingyun chuckled. Young master, you won't be able to handle their instigation like this. Follow me, I will arrange the room for you. The room Fu Qingyun arranged was very elegant. It was just that this room had been decorated like a female's accommodation. Even the blanket was fragrant. Fu Qingyun immediately said, "This is where I rest. If young master is not satisfied, we can change another room." There's no need for that. Mu placed his backpack on the table. However, Fu Qingyun was still in the room and didn't leave. Biting her bright red lips, she asked gently, "Does young master still have any other instructions?" "I've got nothing more, much thanks, Sister Yuner." Just as Mu finished his words, his backpack moved and a little white fox carrying a little backpack popped out. Fu Qingyun took a glance and immediately turned around to walk out, muttering to herself, "No wonder, he had brought his own little vixen." Hu Linger's body reeked of alcohol and Mu frowned. "Linger, you have been secretly drinking in the backpack." "No." The white fox was drunk and suddenly gave a hiccup. She immediately shut her mouth, but she gave another hiccup. She stood up with her two back legs and swayed, almost falling off from the table. Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He took out an empty wine jar from the backpack and said, "You still say no? I've studied great educational heavenly devil scriptures these past few days, and I have found a technique that's suitable for you. It's called Spirit Creation Technique. After completely comprehending this technique for a few days, I've decided to teach it to you, and you ended up drunk again." The fox on the table finally fell head first. Mu carried her up and threw her onto the bed. Hu Linger hugged the pillow and fell asleep. Mu was also very worn out from avoiding the chase of Dragon Rider sect. Thus he too fell into a deep sleep after lying down. When night fell, he was awoken by hunger and he instantly woke up. However, he saw Hu Linger still asleep, thus he didn't wake her up. Mu took out the toothpaste and wooden toothbrush from his backpack and washed up. Walking out of the room, there was a girl waiting outside, and when she saw Mu, her eyes lit up and smiled. "Young master has woken up." Sister knew young master must be hungry, therefore she had prepared the dishes already, and asked me to stay here to invite young master for dinner. Mu said his thanks and followed her to an elegant room and rain-listening pavilion. With bamboos beside the window, there was a pavilion, rock garden and pool past the bamboos, looking very serene. Mu sat down and the few girls walked in a line and placed down the dishes. Soon there was a table filled with dishes. Outside the window, a maiden dressed in white carried her guqin and sat in the pavilion, playing it gently. A moment later, another few girls came over, and there were some that carried pipa, some that carried long flute, and some that carried guzheng as they sat there to perform. Qin Mu was enthralled as he ate the food while watching and listening to the performance. He felt carefree and relaxed. His gaze landed on the 10 fingers of the girl who was playing the guzheng and subconsciously put down his bowl and chopsticks. His fingers also started strumming by themselves. A while later, his gaze landed on the body of the pipa girl as he observed the skill of her fingers. He then looked at the finger skill of the flute girl as he reveled in it. Thunder fingers of the pipa player not only has to pluck but also has to flick, bow, hook, pick, struck, strum. Qin Mu's eyes became brighter and brighter. The finger skills of the girls who were playing in the pavilion made him more and more excited. Comparing them with Thunderclap 8 strikes that he had cultivated, he only felt that his comprehension of the move Thunder fingers of the pipa player was becoming deeper and deeper. He had a feeling of understanding and was itching to jump in to play to his content. Looking at the girls playing the instruments, he also had a desire to play as well. This desire burned more and more furiously. However, he didn't know much about temperament and didn't dare to offend these beautiful women without careful consideration. However, that desire became more and more restless. He was so enthralled that he had even forgotten to eat. His 10 fingers were sometimes playing the guzheng, sometimes fiddling the pipa, sometimes pressing onto the flute, and sometimes strumming the guzheng. The girls in the pavilion seemed to have noticed the youth behind the window. A girl said softly, "Sister Yuer, young master is looking at you. I think he has taken a fancy to you." That girl lowered her head in embarrassment and didn't dare to lift it up. Right at this moment, Qin Mu was finally so pleased and lost his sense of measure. Standing up and taking a big stride, he crashed through the window and came to the pavilion in a few steps. Without any explanation, he stretched out his hand and snatched the pipa from that Sister Yuer's hand. The girls in the pavilion actually thought that the young cult master was going to get rough and snatch the maiden. Never would they expect the young cult master did not snatch Sister Yuer and instead snatched her pipa away. Qin Mu seemed to have entered a wonderful state. With the pipa in his arms, he gently strummed it. What came out wasn't a clear and melodious tune. It instead gave off crackling sounds of thunder splitting the sky, shocking all the girls. Qin Mu lost himself in the pleasure and his 10 fingers went up and down on the pipa. The claps of thunder became melodious music in his ears which messed up all the flute sound, guzheng's sound and guzheng's sound. These girls had worked hard on the tune and right after they were messed up by the thunderclaps Qin Mu had strummed out, they quickly made some adjustments and played solemnly, trying to suppress the noise Qin Mu had made. Ding! 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 The thunderclaps played by Qin Mu suddenly changed and became sonorous and powerful. It was like the clang of metal in stone with a majestic killing aura. It once again suppressed the tune of the girls with the weird noises from the pipa, causing everyone to look at each other in dismay. The competitive spirits of these girls were instead ignited. The guzheng girl gave a smack with her palm, and her guzheng was raised vertically on the floor. The guzheng girl played the guzheng like a harp. Her 10 fingers went back and forth rapidly, causing the tempo of the music to become so fast that humans' ears couldn't differentiate the flavors of the notes. The flute girl also stood up and her footstep moved subconsciously. With every step, her loftiness grew and her flute sound became brighter. That temperament swept up flowers in a whirlwind upwards, wholeheartedly trying to suppress the weird noises Qin Mu had played. At the side, a girl hugged a Daruan and had streamers fluttering behind her which touched the floor from time to time, propping this girl in the sky, suppressing the weird noises Qin Mu made from the sky. Another girl then ran out of the pavilion. A moment later, this girl pushed out a big yangqin and started to strike the yangqin. The temperament that the yangqin gave off was clear, fierce, and actually had the momentum to turn into divine arts. The temperament pushed the girls in front of the yangqin to go along with it to suppress Qin Mu as well as the noise created by Qin Mu. Another girl then ran out of the pavilion and a boom sounded out. That girl actually tore down the house and pushed out a bianzhong that had 56 bells of different sizes. That girl wielded a mallet and struck the bells, causing the bells to resonate loudly. The 56 bells all had their own tones which boomed towards Qin Mu. Qin Mu was beside himself with joy and laughed loudly as he hugged the pipa. The tune that a pipa could play was very limited, but in his hand, he had an atmosphere of a powerful army. It felt as if one had entered the slaughter grounds of devils and gods that was densely covered with dark clouds and lightning, with the mighty devils and gods in a full-on slaughter. In his mind, no matter if it was the thunderclap 8 strikes that old Ma had imparted to him, village chief sword skill, cripple's leg skills, butcher's knife skills or mute's hammer skills, they were all incorporated into his play. The writings in great educational heavenly devil scriptures that were related to temperament also surged into his mind at this instant, causing the sound of his pipa to hasten and his killing aura to grow heavier. Meanwhile, the God voice, devil voice, and Buddha voice could be faintly heard together with the pipa sound. Suddenly this pavilion couldn't handle the temperament of everyone and shattered into pieces. The girls and Qin Mu was about to fall in the pool when their vital qi burst forth at once and allowed them to stand on the water. As the girls traveled on the water, they revolved around Qin Mu continuously and the temperament became even more hurried and tight. Qin Mu's vital qi burst forth and his pipa was raised vertically in the air. With his 10 fingers dancing rapidly, the sound of the pipa hastened and blocked the tune coming from all directions. Suddenly the pipa strings snapped off one by one and Qin Mu threw away the pipa. The girls became delighted, however. They saw the pool water suddenly floating upwards and become strings of water which surrounded Qin Mu. Qin Mu was no longer restricted by the size of the pipa, and the water strings around him were strings he could strum. As he plucked the water strings, thunderclaps boomed out which caused the girls to sway from the tremors. "What's the ruckus about?" Fu Qingyun walked over and saw all the girls retreating step by step in defeat. Suddenly a girl laughed out loud and threw away her bamboo flute. She then started dancing along with Qin Mu's temperament as she abandoned all restraint in her messy clothes. Fu Qingyun gave an astonished expression and went back to the house to take out her pipa at once. "Young master is comprehending a divine art? Fall back, sisters. Let me lend him a helping hand." Just as she was saying that, all the girls were defeated and got controlled by Qin Mu's temperament. They sang and danced beautifully on the water, giving off smiles that were devilish. Fu Qingyun shook her head repeatedly. The sound of her pipa rang out and suppressed the tune that Qin Mu had played using the flowing water. All the girls only regained their consciousness now and immediately bowed towards Fu Qingyun before retreating from the pool. Young master's temperament seemed to have many things mixed in with it. Fu Qingyun gently plucked and slowly strummed, using a milder temperament to face the battle. She immediately tested out the things hidden in Qin Mu's temperament. There was God voice, Buddha voice and devil voice contained in Qin Mu's temperament, which was very weird. There was also a killing aura going on a punitive expedition and seemed like it could cause a massacre as it sped along. There were writings regarding temperament in great educational heavenly devil scriptures of heavenly devil cult, however, it wasn't as complicated and scattered like this. She could hear from Qin Mu's temperament that there was the temperament technique of heavenly devil cult, which was called heavenly devil rainbow raiment tune. However, this was only a part of Qin Mu's temperament. Apparently, Qin Mu had sunk into a wonderful state and couldn't free himself. He should be comprehending something that was even more profound and was trying to mix everything together. Once Fu Qingyun was ascertained of Qin Mu's real intention, she felt reassured. This kind of crazed state was extremely hard to get, and only when one was in a deep level of comprehension could they access such a crazed state. You don't succeed if you aren't crazy. You won't become Buddha if you aren't crazy. Fu Qingyun held the pipa and the temperament burst forth from her fingers gradually grew urgent. She was trying to guide Qin Mu, to allow all his skills to converge together and complete their fusion. The girls of Rain Listening Pavilion might act willfully when they had the battle of music with Qin Mu, but it had also been a great help to Qin Mu. The combative and high pressure had forced Qin Mu to continuously improve his temperament, whereas she used a method to guide and to oppose him, to allow Qin Mu to fuse better and faster. She had extremely high attainments in temperament that far surpassed many girls in Rain Listening Pavilion. With her guidance and pressure, Qin Mu improved rapidly. Qin Mu used Heavenly Devil Rainbow Raiment tune and allowed her to benefit as well. Heavenly Devil Rainbow Raiment was a technique in great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. Even though Fu Qingyun had learned it before, she didn't learn it completely. When she was guiding Qin Mu, she had also received Qin Mu's guidance at the same time. Thus she managed to learn the parts in Heavenly Devil Rainbow Raiment tune that she hadn't learned. After some time, Fu Qingyun noticed that Qin Mu was gradually breaking free from his crazed state. The temperament of the two of them slowly conformed with each other as they played a song together in perfect harmony. However, at this moment, a dozen of girls carried out a huge bell from the room. The bell was higher than a human, with Hu Linger sitting on the top and shouting, "Let's strike the bell. We definitely can break his devil voice." Fu Qingyun stopped playing her instrument and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She then scolded, "Are you trying to kill young master? Stop fooling around and put back the bell." Those girls lowered their heads in disappointment and carried the bell back. Hu Linger was also disappointed. It was obvious she wasn't happy that she didn't get to use the big bell. Qin Mu regained consciousness and looked at his surroundings in astonishment. Only now did he realize that he had created such a ruckus and apologized to Fu Qingyun at once. These little girls are insensible and almost delayed young master's cultivation. Young master? Do not blame them. Fu Qingyun smiled. Young master hasn't eaten yet. You have been restless the whole night and the sky is almost bright. Qin Mu immediately called the little fox spirit, the troublemaker, to eat together. The youth in brocade clothes threw away the dishes that were not finished and took the empty plates to wash. The few girls saw it and tried to snatch the chore in a flurry. How can young master do this kind of crude and lowly chores? Just leave it to us. Qin Mu smiled. There's no noble and lowly in the path, so how can chores be noble or lowly? I have already finished washing. There's no need for all of you to dirty your hands again. Fu Qingyun asked, "What realm is young master in now?" With fire on both of his hands, Qin Mu evaporated the water beads on his hands and replied, "I'm still in Spirit Embryo Realm." Fu Qingyun frowned slightly. Spirit Embryo Realm was a little too low, and it would be very difficult to enter Imperial College. Even the scholars that Imperial College had made an exception to take in were normally martial arts practitioners who had awakened their 5 elements divine treasure. With just Spirit Embryo Realm, it was probably impossible to pass Imperial College's examinations. She had originally thought that Qin Mu at least was at 5 elements realm. After all, when she saw Qin Mu 3 years ago, he was already at Spirit Embryo Realm. She didn't expect that Qin Mu had actually not improved for the past 3 years. What she didn't know was that even though Qin Mu's realm didn't increase, his cultivation had instead increased by leaps and bounds. Furthermore, with his spirit embryo awakening the 4th time, his 4 great vital qi could circulate as he wished, and the density of his vital qi was also outstanding among the martial arts practitioners. From now, there are still 2 days before Imperial College starts school. Young master should try as much as you can to break the wall and succeed in 2 days' time. Even though Fu Qingyun had said so, she still felt a little worried in her heart. It was simply too forced for him to succeed in wall break in just 2 days. It was practically an impossible task. Qin Mu nodded his head and smiled. "I will definitely succeed in wall break 2 days later." Fu Qingyun drove the girls out and said, "Don't come and disturb young master for the next 2 days. Little fox, don't stay here as well. Let young master comprehend to his heart's delight." Hu Linger could only follow them and leave. However, the girls told the little fox, "Sister Linger, let us teach you the skill of enticement. It's pretty interesting." When Qin Mu walked out of Great Ruins, he had been trying to break open his 5-element divine treasure to enter 5 elements realm. After studying great educational heavenly devil scriptures for the past few days, he also pretty much had quite some understanding to it. There are secrets to awakening 5 elements divine treasure in great educational heavenly devil scriptures. In the scriptures it stated, to forget the form and raise qi into golden liquid, to accept with philosophical calm whatever fate may be, to forget the form and transform it into qi, then into spirit, to pass through the 3 passes of thus avenue, purple red palace the scorching moon furnace, spirit embryo the silent great profound altar, cinnabar the scarlet phoenix's blood, mercury the black tortoise's liver, gold lead chose to classify as clay pot, wood mercury flew off to reside in mud ball, magnificent pond right in the sea of qi, divine room right in the yellow court. The golden liquid was the golden light in spirit embryo divine treasure. Qin Mu had already created his silent great profound altar in his spirit embryo. The golden sea in his spirit embryo divine treasure was already emptied, and with his vital qi circulating, he had already formed the marking of the profound altar below his spirit embryo. All that was left now was to form a profound altar using vital qi formations in his spirit embryo divine treasure. The center of the profound altar would be his spirit embryo. 5 Elements Divine Treasure was also called 5 Phases Divine Treasure. It was located between 2 breasts where the heart was. This was why the heart was also called the Purple-Red Palace. The cinnabar and Mercury in great educational heavenly devil scriptures were all metaphors. Cinnabar referred to fire, Mercury referred to water, lead was gold, wood Mercury was wood, and clay pot was earth, which corresponded to the 5 elements. They were fire element Mars, water element Mercury, gold element Venus, wood element Jupiter, and earth element Saturn. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures had stated that in order to open 5 Elements Divine Treasure, the positions of the stars must be set. The positions of the stars meant that the 5 elements in the sky should correspond to the 5 elements in 5 Elements Divine Treasure of the human body. With everyone having different body constitution, different growth, and different gender, this resulted in different positions of the 5 elements in the 5 Elements Divine Treasure. Therefore, he required the help of the 5 elements in the sky to calculate the 5 elements in his body, to determine the positions of the stars, and used his vital qi to break through. Qin Mu took out a thick stack of papers from his backpack, as well as a charcoal pencil and an abacus. Beside him was 10 books of computational canons. Qin Mu flipped the papers, and on each page was filled with densely packed calculations. He was using the fundamental methods to calculate the positions of the 5 elements, and after these few days, he was finally reaching the end. The abacus clacked non-stop, and when the sun was finally high in the sky, Qin Mu stretched his body and stood up to move his limbs. On the first sheet of paper was a heart drawn by him. Beside the heart was numerous calculations that were closed together. 5 lines were then drawn out which surrounded the heart in a pentagon shape. Every corner was marked out with the gold, wood, water, fire, and earth attributes. Qin Mu used the principles of mutual creation and destruction among the 5 elements to calculate the positions of the stars. He finally calculated out the exact location of his purple-red palace. Qin Mu exercised his body and started to move slowly. Executing his vital qi, he let his vital qi course vigorously through his body, and at the same time, whenever his vital qi passed by his spirit embryo, it became more and more boundless. Qin Mu walked faster and faster, and gradually a wind was raised in the room. The wind grew bigger and bigger, blowing open the doors and windows. Qin Mu just walked out of the building and came to the courtyard without regards to other as he scampered around endlessly. Finally, as his vital qi was circulated to its maximum, his spirit embryo on the profound altar stood up in his spirit embryo divine treasure. Raising both his hands to the sky, each hand had 5 strands of vital qi surging into the sky of the divine treasure. With the 2 converging into one, they turned into 5 stars. The 5 stars were connected to each other with vital qi. With their sides and corners connected to each other, they formed a pentagon. The pentagon then gradually turned bright and shone down like a mirror with a hum in his spirit embryo divine treasure, opening the conception and governor vessels. As it continued shining down his throat, the light shone down with a hum onto his ventricle. Qin Mu's vital qi burst forth boundlessly and surged down the path of light, striking onto the place where the light was shining on. A rumble rang out beside his ears, and a formless door was opened in his ventricle. That formless wall was shattered into pieces by his vital qi and vanished without a trace. A divine treasure was hereby awakened. A God voice sounded in his mind, but before it could interfere with his vital qi circulation, his 5 elements divine treasure was already opened. Qin Mu stopped in his steps. The accumulation for the past half a month was transformed into this single copious strike. It really was refreshing to his heart's content. Why didn't young master cultivate in silence and had instead come out? Fu Qingyun walked over and grumbled slightly. Qin Mu opened his eyes. His aura was continuously rising and his cultivation became denser and denser. He then smiled and said, "I've broken the wall." Fu Qingyun's heart leaped and stared at him with a look of disbelief. She muttered, "What did young master break?" "I have broken the wall of my 5 elements divine treasure." Qin Mu smiled. Fu Qingyun felt lightheaded. "But I had just left your room." According to Fu Qingyun's experience, the normal speed for wall break required more than 1 try. Some people even needed to try a few thousand times before they could break the wall and succeed in wall break. Calculating out the stars' positions was one thing and wall break was another. 5 elements wall break required one to impact the wall again and again with his vital chi, to create a small crack on it, and then to expand the crack slowly to finally break the wall completely. Only then could it be considered a success when the wall was completely unable to regenerate. Qinmu immediately succeeded in wall break right after she had just left. That was very rare. Unless... Fu Qingyun's heart leaped. Unless Qinmu's vital chi was abnormally vigorous. This way he could be able to succeed in wall break with just one try. Young master, let us purely use vital chi to clash with our palms. Fu Qingyun saw that he was puzzled and immediately smiled. I'll close my other divine treasures and leave only my spirit embryo and 5 elements open. I just want to test how profound young master's cultivation is. Qinmu nodded his head. Their palms touched and the vital chi of each other burst forth. Fu Qingyun gave a grunt and sound of wind whooshed past her ears. The scenery in front of her eyes changed continuously as she flew backward and crashed through a few buildings and a few high walls before stopping the impetus and got embedded on a wall. Covered in dirt, she broke free from the wall and raised her head to take a look. She saw that she was about 130 yards away from Qinmu. In between them were a few buildings and walls that had huge human-shaped holes created by him. Through the holes she could see Qinmu and couldn't help having a lingering fear in her heart. What she used was her strength from 5 elements realm, and it was only a clash with Qinmu's vital chi. She didn't expect that the difference between them would be so huge. It couldn't help making her slight dejected. Blow, it was really a huge blow to her. However, she soon regained her state of mind and thought to herself, he's our sacred cult's young cult master after all. It's perfectly logical for him to have this kind of cultivation. Furthermore, in the contest at Disabled Elderly Village, he had already ruthlessly defeated me. Qinmu immediately came forward. Fu Qingyun smiled. I'm fine. Young master's cultivation is abnormally vigorous as expected. Patriarch and cult mistress wasn't wrong in their judgment. There was still a day and a half to the opening of Imperial College. Young master had better stabilize your realm. Qinmu understood. With the success of 5 elements wall break and the awakening of another divine treasure, there were some new transformations happening in his body, and he had yet to check them. Fu Qingyun looked around and laughed bitterly to herself. Ever since Qinmu came here, Rain Listening Pavilion had suffered disasters after disasters. It was either the pavilion getting wrecked or the buildings getting holed. He's the young cult master after all, tearing places down wherever he goes. Luckily, he will leave my place 2 days later and go tear down Imperial College. And Patriarch is going to have a headache and I can finally relax. Qinmu didn't know she harbored the thoughts of him tearing down Imperial College and went back into his room. The youth sat down quietly and his consciousness slipped into his 5 elements divine treasure. In the divine treasure was a starry sky and there were 5 huge stars shining. Other than that, it was complete darkness. 5 elements divine treasure is actually completely different from spirit embryo divine treasure. Qinmu was astonished. There was no cultivation technique for 5 elements divine treasure in his Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. This gave him a slight headache. He had seen the cultivation pictures of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. There were only the first 2 pictures and the third one was incomplete. Qinmu tried his best to remember that incomplete picture. In the incomplete picture, there were indeed stars, but other than the 5 stars, there were also 5 gods. Each of them had his own design and his own path of vital circulation. However, more than half of the picture was destroyed and the specific path of circulation was already blurred with age. Qinmu composed himself and his consciousness floated. In the high and chilly starry sky, his consciousness planned to float its way up to one of the stars. However, as his consciousness flew, the star actually seemed to be flying away as well. The distance between him and the star always stayed the same far. Qinmu frowned and tried to fly to the other stars. Those stars also flew away as he tried to get close to them. What is going on? Qinmu was stumped. He wanted to see if there were the 5 gods in the cultivation pictures on the stars. However, now that he couldn't reach the stars, he could only drop it. His consciousness remained in his 5 elements divine treasure. He executed his Overlord Body 3 elixir technique and instantly saw a strange transformation. Suddenly an orange star started to tremble and a fire-red glow shot straight out from the star and onto Qinmu's consciousness with a buzz. Qin Mu instantly felt his consciousness flooded with energy that was blazing like fire. That energy was changing the structure of his consciousness and allowed his consciousness to have a physical body. Under the prompts of the flame, legs grew out from his consciousness, followed by arms and head. In just a short while, his consciousness merged with the peculiar energy, and he became a queer being with a human face and bull body. Qin Mu was blank. He lowered his head to have a look and saw that his body was a scarlet bullock, and there was a bull's tail that was grown behind his buttocks. His front was bare, and on the tip of his tail was a tuft of long fur. Qin Mu swayed his tail, and his tail ended up whipping on his large and firm buttocks, giving off a burning sensation. His 2 legs were bull's legs, and his thighs were sturdy and strong. They were as thick as elephant's legs, however his shanks were very slender. His feet were bull's hooves. Not only that, the glow that shot out from the fire element star was still gathering and formed 2 fire dragons with fierce claws and teeth under his feet. Fire God! Qin Mu's heart leaped. He had seen similar sculptures in the divine temples in Border Dragon City. The people of Great Ruins worshipped sculptures of this form as the fire god. However, the energy surging from the fire element star wasn't strong. The body that had formed off his consciousness was only a faint apparition. Could this be the fire element divine treasure in my 5 elements divine treasure? In that case, what about the other elements? Just as Qin Mu thought of this, another sky blue star also suddenly trembled. An aqua blue glow shot down from that star and landed on his body with a buzz. At the same time, the other 3 stars with different colors trembled, and each of them had its own glow shining down, landing on his body one after another. Qin Mu gave a grunt, and his fire god form immediately started to fall apart, and at the same time the other forms started rising. However, the attributes of the energies shot from the 5 stars were completely different, and not only were they different, they even countered and restrained each other. They clashed together in his consciousness and obliterated each other in the clash. Boom! A loud explosion sounded out in Qin Mu's consciousness, which had entered his 5 elements divine treasure, was obliterated in the explosion. Qin Mu's eyes blacked out and fainted. When he woke up, he realized he was lying on a bed and Hu Linger was placing a warm, moisturizing towel on his forehead. Meanwhile, his head was so painful that it felt like it was a watermelon smashed on the floor, splitting apart. In front of the bed, a few girls stood there with concerned expressions. Young Master seemed to have suffered from qi deviation. Luckily, Linger discovered it earlier and called us. Fu Qingyun had a worried look and said, "Young Master, I had already called people to brew the medicine and it would be ready soon. However, the institution would open in 2 days and I'm afraid young master wouldn't be able to make it. Qi deviation required more than 10 days of recuperation." Outside the door, 2 girls were brewing the medicine and the fragrance of the medicine floated over. Qin Mu struggled to get up and took a sniff of the fragrance before saying, "I have injured my consciousness and my spirit is damaged. The medicine you are brewing is the right prescription, however, it lacks pond monkshood. Pick 2 mace of pond monkshood. Carry me up, let me brew the medicine." Fu Qingyun was astonished. This young cult master actually knew how to brew medicine? She was skeptical and ordered her girls to grab the herbs. She raised Qin Mu and found out that Qin Mu's consciousness was frail and it was hard for him to move. Therefore she ordered people to carry the medicine furnace and furnace fire in. Qin Mu endured his headache and executed his vital qi to lift up the medicine furnace. He shook it gently and the medicine furnace landed on the ground. However, the water and the herbs inside the furnace floated in the air by his vital qi. The girl who had grabbed the herbs came back and threw the pond monk's hood into it at once. Qin Mu's hand technique changed irregularly and soon he had mixed all medicinal properties together, and with a gently pluck, the medicinal dregs automatically dropped out from the water. The water vapor then evaporated and a few red pellets were left. Qin Mu took the red pellets and pushed out the medicinal energy. His headache gradually lessened, however, sometimes he still had the head-splitting pain from time to time. "I have to brew another set of medicine tomorrow morning and I'll completely recover." The girls in the room were astonished. Qin Mu's technique of brewing medicine was pure and simple yet ever-changing, dazzling their eyes. Suffering from qi deviation wasn't a small matter. Was this medicine really that effective to be able to help him recover in half a day? Without an advancement in technique, It looks like I won't be able to cultivate my 5 elements divine treasure and make the PWR of the divine treasure my own cultivation. Qinmu recovered his strength and stood up with a smile. I got hasty and caused sisters to be worried. Young master is skilled in the art of healing. Do you have knowledge in gynecology? A girl suddenly asked. Qinmu said, as long as it involves medical skill, I know everything. The girl's expression turned slightly red. I have slight pain in my womb. I don't know if young master. Qinmu checked her pulse and smiled. Small issue, your inner qi lacks proper care and you have a slight cold womb. Let me write out a prescription for you. A girl immediately came forward and passed him brush and ink. Qinmu picked up the brush and wrote down a prescription. This medicine is womb-warming pill. You take it and it will nurse your inner qi and break the root of the illness. The eyes of the remaining girls in the room lit up. The Guqin girl, whose face was red from embarrassment, asked in a soft voice, Young master, I also have a little problem. Young master, take a look at me too. Young master, my menstruation is irregular. Fu Qingyun's head became oversized and she shouted, Young master was just suffered from qi deviation and had yet completely recovered. All of you stop making a racket and let young master rest quietly. Qinmu smiled. It's no bother. I can't train after getting suffering from qi deviation. It just so happens that I can help the sisters to nurse their bodies while I'm resting. It doesn't take much energy. Furthermore, I eat and stay here in Sister Yuner's place, and how could I not repay everyone for your taking care of me? The girls were delighted and lined them up. Qinmu diagnosed their conditions and wrote out prescriptions for them one by one. The Pipa girl saw Fu Qin still in the room and smiled. Sister, why are you still here? Fu Qingyun sneered. After a while she came forward and stretched her hand out and bit her lips, saying in a low voice, Young master, my cultivation may be high but there are some problems with my body. For the past few months I suffered from red dragon imbalance. Sometimes it comes and sometimes it doesn't. Qinmu checked her pulse and said, For months ago when sister was cultivating, did a side stitch hit you? It was a problem from then. Fu Qingyun nodded her head repeatedly. A side stitch did hit me once. I thought it was a small problem, therefore I didn't put it to heart. Unknowingly the night had fallen and the decorative lanterns were raised in the capital city, brightening it like daytime. The so-called Flower Street and Willow Alley were where famous scholars of capital city would frequent. There were also high officials and noble persons that would usually visit at night. Flower Alley wasn't only a place to sell bodies. The later at night it got, the more they weren't selling their bodies but their arts. The beauties of Flower Alley knew the 4 arts and could sing, dance and recite poems. This could extremely touch the hearts of nobles. However, tonight, the cat houses in Flower Alley were empty and maidens were all queuing up in the alley. There were none providing services in the cat house, and when the clients, all the most distinguished people in the capital city, asked for their familiar maidens, they were told, Here in Rain Listening Pavilion comes a divine physician in gynecology and the sisters are all queuing up to see him. They've no time to earn a living. May young masters come back tomorrow. A divine physician in gynecology came to Flower Alley? Outside the alley, an elder in civilian clothes came out from a sedan and said in astonishment, Go and ask around about the divine physician's medical expertise. After some time, a servant came back to report, Old master, the ladies in Flower Alley all said he was very good and his medical expertise is a miracle. The elder in civilian clothes muttered to himself irresolutely and an advisor beside him said in a low voice, Old master must be thinking about that person in the palace. There are ears everywhere. Do not speak too much. The elder in civilian clothes gave a sigh and continued, That person in the palace has been plagued by an illness for a long time. Even the imperial physician could do nothing about it and couldn't even make a diagnosis. We could only hope to find a divine physician that could extend her life, but I'm afraid time is running out. Words are not proof. Summon imperial physician Xiao over, and let him test this divine physician of Flower Alley. Understood. Not long later, imperial physician Xiao arrived and bowed. Old lord, what for have you summoned me here? There's no need for formalities outside Flower Alley. The elder in civilian clothes explained. There in Flower Alley comes a divine physician. Could I request Lord Xiao to check on his abilities to see if he has the capability to cure that person in the palace? Imperial physician Xiao had a full head of white hair, but his eyebrows were green and his eyes were bloodshot. He sneered. How would Flower Alley have any divine physician? There is merely just a cheat that is angling for fame and cheating women and children. Why do we have to see him? The elder in civilian clothes frowned and Imperial physician's heart leaped. He immediately said, Old Lord, I have no need to see him. I just need to see the prescriptions he has written out. Once he finished saying, he snatched the prescription from a lady from Flower Alley who had just seen the physician. Taking a look, he sneered. Take a look, Old Lord. The herbs in his prescription are all the cheapest herbs. How could someone with this kind of skill see that person in the palace? The elder in civilian replied calmly and slowly. Herbs, expensive or cheap, are all equal. They are all items to save lives. The women of Flower Alley are not nobles and don't have much money. To be able to use cheap herbs to cure illness is then a real ability. You and I shall go in to take a look. You test him. Imperial physician grudgingly accepted and followed him into Flower Alley. Flower Alley was very deep and inside were all women of the cat houses queuing up to see the physician. The two of them finally squeezed into the rain-listening pavilion with great difficulty, and when they entered the pavilion, they only saw a handsome youth in brocade clothes seeing the patients. Imperial physician Xiao sneered. Look at him, merely 14 to 15 years old, and he's already roamed around to cheat money. Now can Old Lord give up already? Look at his pulse condition, even though it's deep, it becomes unstable from time to time. This means that he has qi deviation. For someone that can't even cure himself, he still dares to come out and cheat people. Old Lord, we can go back now. The elder in civilian clothes replied impassively. I told you to go, so go. Imperial physician Xiao could only go forward. He pushed aside the girls and just sat down in front of Qin Mu. He stretched out his palm and said with a booming voice, Check what illness do I have? Qin Mu was startled and raised his head to take a look at this elder. He didn't check his pulse and just said with a solemn expression, Old mister, you're seriously ill. Imperial physician Xiao sneered and stood up. You cheat. How dare you? You're an apothecary, aren't you? Qin Mu continued. There are thousands of medicine odors on your body and you have surrounded yourself with medicines for years, breathing in their medicinal properties. Furthermore, you prescribed for yourself and frequently bathed in medicinal baths. You also took many spirit pills and miracle medicines made by yourself. However, you aren't proficient in your medicinal expertise and couldn't take care of the poison in the medicine. Now there are hundreds of poisons accumulated in your body. Your eyebrows are green and eyes are red. This means that the poison has soaked into your skin and reached deep into your eyes. At this stage, you can't be saved. There's nothing I can do about your illness. Only the King of Hell can save you now. Imperial physician Xiao flew into a rage. He was so angry that he gave a smile and asked, Little apothecary, so how long more can I live? Qin Mu hesitated and replied, If you didn't rage, you could still live a while longer. If you raged and the fury attacked your heart, the poison would attack your heart. With the fusion of the medicinal properties, you still have 10. Imperial physician Xiao became even more furious and said coldly, You said I still have 10 days left to live? What happens if I don't die in 10 days? Qin Mu frowned and continued, 987. Imperial physician couldn't control his rage and his aura burst forth, shattering the desk in front of Qin Mu. He then sneered, Are you saying I would die now? If I don't die, I will make you die. 3, 2, 1. Just as Qin Mu said the word 1, Imperial physician Xiao felt a stabbing pain in his heart as if his heart was being torn apart. His cultivation instantly lost control, and the skin on his whole body burst apart. Blood spurted out like a waterfall and he became a bloody man. His body then festered and turned into a pile of pus. I can't save you. Qin Mu shook his head. You shouldn't have raged. This is what happens when you anyhow take medicines made by yourself, but you aren't proficient in your medical expertise. Sister Yuner, do I have to report this corpse to the officials? A commotion brewed inside Flower Alley, and the elder in civilian clothes was also shocked. He nodded his head silently and turned his way to leave Flower Alley. This commotion was soon over and Qin Mu did not continue to see other patients. He instead returned to his room to rest. The next day, he cured his own illness caused by qi deviation and eliminated all further illness. Only then did he started to see patients again, and soon a long queue was once again formed in Flower Alley. Fu Qingyun was secretly worried. Instead of a cat house, her place had now become a clinic. When afternoon came, Fu Qingyun immediately said, "Young master, tomorrow is the day for imperial examinations. You can't see patients anymore. You should leave some energy to handle tomorrow's exams." Qin Mu nodded his head and replied, "You're right. I'll cure these people after the imperial examinations then." Fu Qingyun didn't know whether to laugh or cry and told him in a low voice, "Young master, your job is not an apothecary." Qin Mu replied, "I'm not simply curing their illness. Even though I have learned a lot in regards to the art of healing, my experience is still not extensive. Curing these people helps me to gain my experience as well. Staying in great ruins for over 10 years, Grandpa Apothecary had taught me countless of medical knowledge, but I had no chance to put it into practice. And now, in just over a day, I have managed to test thousands of medical logic." Fu Qingyun's head started to ache. How could the young cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult be like a wandering doctor, seeing all the cat house's girls as patients? Finally, it was the day of Imperial College's examinations. Qin Mu left Flower Alley early in the morning and asked for directions to Imperial College along his way. Imperial College is on top of the mountain in the city's central. Qin Mu came to the gate of Imperial College and raised his head to take a look, exclaiming to himself in admiration. Imperial College was the supreme institution of the empire, and it was imposing. This institution was actually built on a jade mountain, and this mountain was situated at the heart of the 9 Dragons mountain ranges, the position of the pearl held in the dragon's mouth. 9 dragons holding the dragon pearl together. One could imagine how wonderful it looked. The chis of the 9 dragons were gathered here, and it was naturally the spirit of the place. The dragon's chi had caused the entire mountain body to become jade. There were many palaces on the mountain that were either green-tiled or red-tiled. The place near the palace also had several huge ships berthed in the sky and had yet to furl their sails. At this moment, there were thousands of scholars from all around the world gathered in front of the mountain, waiting to enter Imperial College. Under the majestic mountain, there were over 10 official registrars registering the origins and schools of the scholars attending the imperial examinations. Qin Mu queued up, and when it was his turn to register, the sun was already high up in the sky. Qin Mu took out his travel permit and said, "Student is from Lizhou Prefecture." No, he's not from Lizhou Prefecture." Suddenly a fat and short youth squeezed past Qin Mu and smiled. "He's the same as me. We're from River Tomb." "Lord Registrar, write down River Tomb." The registrar raised his head and sneered. "I write according to the place written on the travel permit. You can't anyhow change the census register." The youth was Wei Yong, and when he saw Qin Mu's registered name and census, he became vexed. "That's terrible. We are from the same ship. If you are also from River Tomb, it would be even easier for you to enter Imperial College." Qin Mu was bewildered. "Why so?" Wei Yong glanced around and whispered, "Didn't you hear the news? The scholars from River Tomb had mostly died on the way here. Other than our ship that was attacked by Dragon Rider sect, other people who had traveled by land and sky were all attacked. The ones that lived to get to the capital city were merely a few. It is said that the rebelled sects had ruthlessly planned to make Imperial Preceptor lose face. After all, Imperial Preceptor was from River Tomb. What school are you from? How's your cultivation?" Qin Mu replied, "I'm homeschooled, thus from no school. I have just reached 5 Elements Realm 2 days ago." The registrar shook his head. "Just reach 5 Elements Realm and you still dare to come and take the exams?" After Qin Mu and Wei Yong were done registering, they went through the mountain gate. There were many scholars squeezed here as they waited. When all the scholars were registered in the books, they heard a Taoist announced in a loud voice, "All divine arts practitioner move up the mountain, and the rest shall stay." Not long later, only martial arts practitioners of the Spirit Embryo Realm and 5 Elements Realms were left under the mountain. There were about 2,000 people. That middle-aged Taoist brought people into the mountains, and they didn't go far. A steep cliff that was over 100 yards tall welcomed them. There were no steps up the steep cliff, and there was no ropeway up. They would either have to fly or run up. If one could be able to leap over 100 yards, they could also jump up. If you can't go up, go home. The middle-aged Taoist stood beside the steep cliff and told the scholars from all over the world coldly, "Isn't this simple?" A scholar moved back a few steps and exerted power in his legs to sprint toward the cliff, trying to run up to the peak. However, just as his feet landed on the wall of the cliff, he slipped and smacked onto the jade wall with a splat, his blood spurting out from his head. That entire wall was flawless fine jade. His blood landed on the wall of the cliff and actually slid down, not leaving any stain. The scholars under the cliff all trembled in their hearts. So slippery. That cliff was so slippery and could literally not be stepped on. It was impossible to run it up. Not all scholars had learned the art of flying, and if they wanted to jump up the cliff, the difficulty would be extremely high. In addition, these people were also in spirit embryo and 5 elements realms. With their realms not there yet, they were unable to learn divine arts. Just this wall alone could probably eliminate more than half of the scholars. However, many scholars who had learned the art of flying started to fly up the mountain cliff and passed this stage with ease. However, they were the minority. There were also many scholars who decided to sprint up the cliff, and all of them broke their heads as they sprawled on the cliff without exception. The scholars who had never learned the art of flying frowned hugely. Some of them tried to jump up the mountain cliff. However, with the cliff being over 100 yards tall, who had such a strong physique to jump it up? Many of the people could only jump halfway before they fell back down. As for the scholars who fell back down, they were disqualified and chased out of the mountain. "Isn't it easy going up the cliff?" Wei Yong went forward and chuckled. "All of you only thought about running up, jumping up and flying up. Why didn't you think of pulling yourself up?" He had a chubby head and huge ears, but his thinking was exceptionally flexible. He actually tied his vital chi thread to his swords and controlled his swords to fly up to the top of the cliff first. Wei Yong controlled 10 vital chi threads and used these vital chi threads to grip onto the top of the cliff. He then slowly tightened the vital chi threads and pulled himself up the cliff little by little. When he nearly reached the top, his chubby palms hooked onto the wall of the cliff and flipped himself up the top of the cliff. He waved toward Qin Mu below. "Brother Qin, try pulling yourself up as well?" "There's no need." Qin Mu bent his legs so much that he almost squatted on the floor. The power in his legs burst forth along with his vital chi, and his body whizzed upward. He leaped 120 yards upwards and landed beside Wei Yong with a boom. Wei Yong jumped in shock and looked down with astonishment. "Brother, what you cultivated are battle techniques, right?" "That's right, what you used was a knife. Your battle technique abilities are truly remarkable." Under the mountain cliff, the hundreds of scholars were all stupefied. That middle-aged Taoist nodded his head and wrote a battle word beside Qin Mu's name. He then wrote another wit beside Wei Yong's name. Wei Yong's method was somewhat an opportune shortcut, and the scholars below were enlightened. Ideas flowed into their minds, and they started to use sword control or other techniques to make their vital chi threads hang on the mountain cliff, helping them to climb the cliff in this way. The number of people on top of the cliff grew more and more. Meanwhile, Qin Mu and Wei Yong continued forward. Even though it was a jade summit, there were still hills, springs, waterfall, and greenery here, looking very serene. There were even birds and animals. However, the birds and animals here looked different and were abnormally huge. Furthermore, they usually grew scales and feathers. They should have absorbed the dragon's chi from the 9 dragons' veins, and therefore it caused an alienation. "Please stop, scholars." They came to the first Great Hall of Imperial College. This Great Hall was extremely wide, spanning 300 yards left and right. The platform in front of the Great Hall was also extremely wide and could fit several thousand people. Qin Mu looked around, and the divine arts practitioners that had gone up the mountain earlier weren't here. The examinations for the divine arts practitioners should be different from them. In front of the Great Hall stood 99 Taoists, and behind every Taoist stood a god. These were gods formed by their vital chi. They only had the upper halves of their bodies floating in the air, looking very sturdy and majestic. Awesome! Qin Mu's heart shook violently. The abilities of the 99 Taoists were extraordinary. Making the vital chi have a form, they were probably close to the celestial being realm. The power of every Taoist was probably no inferior to the Hall Masters of Heavenly Devil Cult. As expected of Imperial College, which was famous for being the #1 sacred ground for supreme learning. These 99 Taoists still had yet reached Border Dragon City Lord's level. The apparition of the heavenly god with 8 arms and 8 heads behind Fu Yundi's body was complete and looked real, which was incomparably terrifying. It was clear that these Taoists were a level or two below Fu Yundi. However, why are the gods these 99 Taoists have formed with their vital qi completely the same? Qin Mu frowned. If their ins and outs were found out by their opponents, wouldn't they be slain by their enemies however they liked? This kind of Taoists, Granny can kill 10 with one hand. The youth thought to himself. Imperial preceptor popularized primary school and college. However, there was also its disadvantage, and that was the martial arts and divine arts they taught were very homogeneous. Qin Mu started to feel that sects also had their own good points. After all, what each and every sect taught and was good at was different, and this resulted in the diversity of martial arts and divine arts. Of course, the effect of primary school and college was still extremely powerful. It could allow the talents of many more scholars not to be cramped and thwarted. After all, disciples that were accepted by sects previously were only a minority. Now, having primary schools and colleges everywhere, talented people came forth in large number. These 99 Taoists stood there without moving. Suddenly the gods behind their backs, which were formed by the vital qi, floated out and landed on the circular platforms in front of the great hall. The Taoist in front said with a deep voice, "Scholars from all around the world, form groups of 10, divide into rows and come forward. Unleash your most powerful moves and attack the gods' apparitions in front of you. You can use any method, no matter if it's the God path, Devil path or the Buddha path. Unleash to your heart's content and nothing is prohibited. The gods' apparitions would also attack you, and only one shall remain among the 10. The last one standing on the stage would pass the test." The scholars in front of the great hall went into an uproar. To defend against the attacks of the gods' apparitions and one shall remain among the 10, this test was much crueler than the previous test. The test to climb the cliff had already disqualified half of the scholars, and this test was actually going to disqualify 90% of the scholars. Everyone became frenetic and people split into groups to go up the stage. Wei Yong moved far away from Qin Mu at once and went up another stage. Qin Mu stood on the stage, and not long later, there were 10 people already on the circular platform he was on. Meanwhile, the other 98 platforms all had 10 scholars each. "Begin!" a Taoist shouted. Before the sound of his voice had died away, the 99 gods' apparitions moved at once and attacked the scholars on the stages, and the scholars all tried to defend against the attacks. At this moment, Qin Mu's body motion was like a phantom, as he dodged the attack of the god's apparition and sprinted on the circular stage. 9 explosions sounded out one after another as 9 figures flew off the stage. The scholars that were on the same stage with him were all smacked away by him before they could even be forced off the stage by the god's apparition. On the circular stage, the god's apparition that was attacking Qin Mu suddenly stopped and remained motionless. "You've passed." In front of the hall, the 99 Taoists gave off an astonished expression while the Taoist in the lead solemnly said. Qin Mu bowed to him and walked down the stage. The Taoist had a heavy expression and spoke softly to the Taoists beside him. "I see that this youth is corrupted at heart and has a slightly demonic nature." The other people on the stage were working together to withstand the attacks of the god's apparition, and only he laid his hands on the others. Just as he said that, startled cries sounded from other stages. The other scholars were following Qin Mu's example, and also attacking the scholars that were on the same stage with them, while they were being attacked by the god's apparitions. In just a short while, hundreds of people were forced off the circular stages. Not long later, this test had ended and only 100 people were left. The scholars that could pass were all of 5 elements realm, and no scholars of spirit embryo realm were able to pass. Qin Mu took a look and saw Wei Yong had also passed successfully. The cultivation of this chubby youth was indeed very profound, as expected of a scholar that came from the Wei family of River Tomb. Many Taoists were startled. They had completely not expected that a perfectly designed examination had turned out this way. A moment later, a Taoist shouted loudly, "All scholars that have passed enter the hall while the rest of the scholars leave the mountain." Qin Mu and the other scholars walked towards the great hall in front. However, he kept feeling that there were gazes fixed upon him attentively. Looking back, he saw the gazes of all 99 Taoists landing on him. Qin Mu adjusted his clothes and didn't find anything out of the ordinary. He then gave a radiant smile back to the Taoists and walked into the great hall. Demonic, demonic! Behind him, the 99 Taoists said in unison. The Taoist in the lead wrote down his evaluation behind Qin Mu's name and threw the name register into the air. In the sky, a crane flew past and held the name register in its mouth. It then flew past the Great Hall and went towards the mountains. Such a demonic youth, it's best to eliminate him on the way to prevent him from harming our Imperial College and ruining the Imperial College's reputation. Hope that the examiners behind could disqualify him. Qin Mu and the various scholars went into the Great Hall, but they still didn't see the batch of 6 Directions Realm scholars that had gone up the mountain first. These scholars were all divine arts practitioners, so the contents of their examinations must be different from them. Qin Mu looked at the surroundings and saw some murals on the pillars of this great hall. There were hundreds and thousands of strange murals, making him puzzled. What is this test about? Wei Yong smiled. Imperial College tests different things every year, so no one would know what they are testing. If we knew what they were going to test us, it wouldn't be so difficult to enter Imperial College. Qin Mu nodded his head. Suddenly his heart trembled slightly. The murals on these pillars were actually vital qi circulation diagrams of some techniques. Every picture was the circulation route for different techniques. He looked at them one by one and his heart was rather shocked. For Imperial College to carve the circulation diagrams of techniques here, aren't they a little too at ease? Aren't they afraid that others might pry on them? The vital qi circulation diagrams in this hall are all incomplete diagrams. A scholar beside him said, "Every technique is incomplete. I've heard that the Empire's Grand Chancellor had searched the entire world for these incomplete techniques and carved them here." Qin Mu suddenly noticed a picture and his heart pumped violently for a second. This picture was the circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Then he frowned. This picture should be the circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique at the 6 Directions realm, and wasn't the circulation diagram of 5 Elements realm which he needed the most. Could it be that Patriarch had found the circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique somewhere, therefore, he had carved it here? In that case, does Patriarch know the other circulation diagrams? No matter what, I'll have to become an Imperial Scholar of Imperial College to see Patriarch. Qin Mu memorized diligently and committed the 6 Directions realm circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique on the pillar to memory. He had got the 5 Elements realm's incomplete diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique in Doom Suppression Palace, and together with the 6 Directions realm circulation diagram, the portion that he couldn't understand in the incomplete diagram gradually became clear. However, it was still pretty impossible to patch the incomplete diagram. Since that the young Patriarch had seen the circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique, he might also have the 5 Elements realm's incomplete diagram with him. Even if it was incomplete as well, it might be able to patch the incomplete diagram that Qin Mu knew. This concerned his cultivation and he must be diligent. Suddenly a monk came out from the back of the hall and asked solemnly, "Where are the scholars from River Tomb?" River Tomb scholars stepped forward. "There's no need for you to take this test. Wait at the next test." Wei Yong stared blankly and walked out with 2 other scholars. As they walked towards the inner hall, he turned his head back. "Brother Qin, don't make noise," the monk solemnly said. "The scholars from River Tomb have suffered disastrous casualties and won't have to take further examinations. The rest will stay here and wait for your examination." Qin Mu was indescribably astonished. There was actually a monk in Imperial College. Seeing so many Taoists earlier, he had originally thought that even though it was called Imperial College, it was still a place of Taoism. Never did he expect to see a monk here. Buddhism and Taoism coexist in Imperial College. I wonder what Great Thunderclap Monastery would think. Just as he thought of this, another yellow-robed monk came out from the back of the hall. He had high and long eyebrows that were floating and had a register in his hand. Looking around, he subdued all the scholars in the hall with his snow-bright gaze and opened his mouth. "This test is about your nature." His voice boomed loudly like a huge bell ringing, vibrating the eardrums of people in the hall, making them blanked out. He sat down in the lotus position and his eyebrows drooped as he said, "I will chant the incantation stored in this scripture. If you can't take it, you can leave the great hall. Those that can endure this scripture of mine may proceed to the next test." He put his palms together and rotated his rosary beads. chanting neither too fast nor too slow, Buddha said. Subhuti, all bodhisattvas and mahasattvas should subdue their minds as follows. All living beings born from eggs, wombs, humidity or by transformation, with or without form, either thoughtful or thoughtless, and neither thoughtful nor thoughtless, are all led by me to the final nirvana for the extinction of reincarnation. Although immeasurable, uncountable and unlimited numbers of living beings are thus led to the extinction of reincarnation, it is true that not a living being is led there. Why so? The Buddha voice vibrated and every incantation was like the descent of a rulai, attacking into the minds of all the scholars in the hall, attacking into their bodies, their vital chi, their spirit embryo divine treasure, and their 5 elements divine treasure. Great Rulai Buddhas even appeared in their thoughts and shone brilliantly. The vibrations grew stronger and stronger, becoming so powerful that it was hard for the people to endure. The sound of the vibrations made their chi and blood unstable and dispersed their vital chi, making it difficult for them to defend their divine treasures. It was also incomparably difficult to defend against the chanting of the scriptures. Their minds completely couldn't defend against it, as if all their thoughts were laid bare without any secrets hidden. Finally, a scholar couldn't resist getting up and sprinted out of the hall. If he continued to hear the chant of the yellow-robed monk, he was afraid his vital chi would directly crumble, and his divine treasure would be taken over by the Buddha voice. His muscles, hair, skin, bones, meridians might even crumble apart from the vibrations. Just as this scholar ran out of the great hall, another few people couldn't endure it anymore and ran out as well. Before they could even run out of the great hall, they couldn't resist puking and wanted more than anything to puke out all their organs. The yellow-robed monk remained unmoved and continued to chant his incantation. The Buddhism incantations continued to rumble, and the sounds became heavier and heavier. More and more scholars ran out of the great hall, battered and exhausted. Unknowingly, there were only over 20 people left in the hall. Qin Mu sat in the middle of the hall as the Buddha voice rushed at him, shaking him entirely. The youth remained unmoved and chanted devil voice under his breath. He was in a deadlock with the Buddha voice as it attacked while he defended, causing him to fight with joy. This Buddha voice had the slightest impact on him and was unable to cause any disturbance to his consciousness. After a while, Qin Mu changed to the God language he had learned and become awfully busy trying to contest with the Buddha voice. After some more time, that yellow-robed monk frowned as he opened his eyes to look at Qin Mu sitting there calmly while raising his head to look at the murals on the pillar. It was as if he had no reaction to his chants, and at this time, there were only 10-something people left in the hall. This is strange. It obvious wrote demonic on his evaluation and emphasized on observing him. If he was really evil at heart, how could he endure so long under my Buddha voice? The yellow-robed monk was puzzled, and the Buddha voice in his mouth subconsciously slowed down as he thought to himself, he doesn't have any demonic nature now. If I purposely force him to turn back, I'm afraid all the scholars in the hall would be forced out of the great hall as well, and no one will pass. He stopped and got up. All of you have passed. Go out from the back of the hall and proceed to the next test. All the people felt like a boulder was lifted from their shoulders and stood up. They had unknowingly let out a whole body of sweat which had soaked their clothes. Only Qin Mu seemed to have no feeling and didn't give off even a single drop of sweat. The yellow-robed monk sized him up again and took out the register and added annotations to the back of everyone's name. When he got to Qin Mu, the yellow-robed monk hesitated for a moment before writing, "Heart of a newborn," unmoved by the outside world. The monk walked out from the back of the hall and threw the register into the sky. The crane in midair flew over and held the register in its beak, flying upwards. The yellow-robed monk returned back into the hall. The crane flew to halfway up the mountain and landed in front of a great hall. The crane passed the book in its beak to a boy that was walking over. The boy hurriedly entered the hall and passed the book to a middle-aged Taoist in the hall. "Teacher Ling Yun, the register is here." Taoist Ling Yun flipped open the name register and smiled. Every year Imperial College would have to give out 10 places to choose outstanding students from the Spirit Embryo Realm and 5 Elements Realm scholars. I wonder what talents are here this year. He took a look and nodded his head gently. There are still 14 people left and they all have high evaluations. Even though there were unrest this year and the talents are not as good as before, there are still young talents that deserve to pay attention to. He stared at Qin Mu's name with a weird expression. He read the evaluations a few times and was puzzled. What's going on with the one called Qin Mu? Why did they write that he had a demonic nature and emphasize to observe him? And why did they say he had a heart of a newborn and was unmoved by the outside world? The bunch of fellows, writing evaluations any old how. The boy said, "Teacher, the 3 scholars from River Tomb have already been selected without announcement. Teacher will have to disqualify 7 people this round. Furthermore, General of Heavenly Strategies said that his daughter would be coming for the examinations and hoped teacher would show more consideration for her. Also, a letter came from Imperial Officer Manor stating that one of his grandsons wished to enter Imperial College to cultivate. There are great general of White Horse and Qin family of the capital city too. King Jinan sent us a letter as well. The young master of King Jinan also wants to." Taoist Ling Yun had a big headache and grumbled. They all want to enter Imperial College and they all have powerful backgrounds. No matter what, they are all higher than me. The 3 scholars from River Tomb have already secured 3 places, giving face to Imperial Preceptor. Now that 10 places have become only 7, how could I arrange so many people? What's the background of this Qin Mu? Could he be from the Qin family of the capital city? The boy shook his head. Qin family said that their young master was called Qin Yu. This Qin Mu should have no relation to the Qin family. His census register is from Lizhou Prefecture. Taoist Ling Yun let out a sigh of relief and said, "I can only wrong him. I won't let him pass my test later then. Who else doesn't have a background? There are still 2 brothers Ding Shan and Ding He, as well as this girl called Si Yunxiang. The others have backgrounds but are not as powerful. This person is the relative of Sparrow Mountain Prefecture head. And there's also her who is the cousin of Yu City Magistrate." Taoist Ling Yun let out another sigh and said, "Second and third ranking officials can't be offended as well, but with the present situation, I can only offend them." After Qin Mu walked out from the back of the hall, he raised his head and there was a mountain road. 10-something scholars climbed the mountain together and not long later, the road ahead suddenly spread out. With waterfalls hanging down the jade cliffs, they were like flowing jade, and with the sun shining on them, they gave off brilliant lights and vibrant colors. The spectacular sight caused Qin Mu and the rest to give off exclaims of admiration that it was truly a sacred grounds of the immortals. "Elder sister, your surname is also Si?" Qin Mu looked at the young girl beside him and asked curiously. "The surname Si is pretty rare and I have a kin that has the surname Si." The girl beside him was called Si Yunxiang. She was a gentle and quiet girl with big eyes. There were not many people with the surname Si, and other than Granny Si, it was still Qin Mu's first time meeting someone else with the surname Si. He couldn't help taking a few more looks at her and went forward to talk to her. The young girl that had the surname Si seemed to detect his gaze and revealed a shy expression. She lowered her head and continued to walk forward, ignoring him. She knows how to be shy, definitely not Granny in disguise. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief as he thought to himself, Granny would never be shy. Granny is now at disabled elderly village and can't leave great ruins, much less running all the way here. If she was Granny, she would definitely not use the surname Si because I would suspect her. Haha. Maybe I'm just thinking too much. He was now slightly skeptical. When he heard the girl's name was Si Yunxiang, he was already slightly suspicious. That's why he had gone up to test her. Not long later, they had come to the front of a great hall. They only saw a boy holding a name register in his hand as he looked at them and said clearly, "Scholars, the examination for this stage is very strict and there might be injuries or even death. Is there anyone that wants to fall out?" In front of the hall, the 14 scholars all remained silent and no one fell out. The boy gave a smile and continued, "Since no one is falling out, then we shall begin the test. Teacher." Taoist Ling Yun walked out from the hall and his gaze circled around Qin Mu and the rest, smiling. The first few stages tested your foundation, creativity, and nature. This stage tests your power. Even though all of you are scholars, it's extraordinary for you to have reached here. Every one of you has astonishing power. I, the Hall Master of Hall of Pure Yang, will personally test all of you. The scholars looked at each other and a scholar said in a low voice, "This isn't fair." Taoist Ling Yun's gaze flickered and he chuckled. "Of course it isn't fair. All of you are from primary school and college, which can't be compared to Imperial College. In addition, I'm a directorate of Imperial College and have read all the scriptures stored away in Imperial College. Even if I'm in the same realm, I far surpass any of you here. Therefore in this test, you only have to persevere under 3 of my moves. As long as you aren't defeated in 3 moves, you will have passed. He smiled warmly. I've sealed my cultivation and only left 5 elements realm open so all of you can be at ease. As he said that, all the scholars let out sighs of relief. As long as it was a contest of the same realm, they were not afraid of anyone. After all, they were the outstanding martial arts practitioners in their own primary schools and colleges. They had the confidence. Taoist Ling Yun also gave a smile and became at ease. Even though it was 3 moves of the same realm, there was much space for him to control the results. In just 3 moves, he could go easy and no one would be able to see any loophole, and he could also disqualify the other scholars in 3 moves. After all, he was a directorate of Imperial College. Even though he didn't dare to admit he was invincible in the same realm, his prowess was still rare in the world. Ding Shan, you'll be the first. Taoist Ling Yun sealed his own cultivation and said solemnly, Boy, fetch the wooden swords. That boy brought over 2 wooden sword cases and placed them vertically on the ground. Taoist Ling Yun stretched his hand out and a fine vital chi thread flew out from his finger. Sweeping up a wooden sword from the sword case, he said, There are 36 swords stored in this sword case, which is suitable for Celestial Dipper sword skill. You can carry the sword case on your back or however you like. Meanwhile, using 1 sword would be enough for me. The scholar called Ding Shan went up and carried the sword case on his back. He bowed to Taoist Ling Yun as a greeting and executed Celestial Dipper sword skill, causing the wooden swords to fly out from the sword case. Celestial Dipper sword skill was a sword skill that scholars from all around the world must learn. Qin Mu had already seen this kind of sword skill on the ship to the capital city. When he had first seen it, he was shaken in his heart and thought that the martial arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire were remarkable. Just a random martial art practitioner he met could already execute such intricate sword skill. However, after he saw nearly all the scholars cultivate Celestial Dipper sword skill, in his mind he thought that he could easily fight 10 of these scholars with a single hand. Ding Shan executed his Celestial Dipper sword skill. The 36 wooden swords flew up and down, and the power wasn't weak. However, the moment he executed this sword skill, Qin Mu knew he definitely couldn't block the 3 moves from Taoist Ling Yun. He couldn't even block a single move. Kai! Taoist Ling Yun used Qi to manipulate his sword and gave a stab. The move of the sword was incomparably tricky as it penetrated through all the 36 swords in a flash and hit Ding Shan on his chest. This youth flew backward from the stab and crashed into the ground, unable to get up for quite a long time. Your cultivation isn't weak. Taoist Ling Yun raised his head and smiled. The other scholars were frightened in their hearts. Taoist Ling Yun's sword skill had entered the realm of transformation, also called perfection. The meaning of transformation was the realm of transformation, to transform into a realm and form a world. Reaching the realm, one would no longer be constrained by their sword skills, and even careless moves were sword skills. The most terrifying thing was that even though Taoist Ling Yun had sealed his other divine treasures and left only his spirit embryo and 5 elements divine treasure opened, his cultivation was still incomparably dense and far surpassed Ding Shan. This was too terrifying. Was there really anyone capable of blocking 3 of his moves? Taoist Ling Yun's gaze flickered and said, Ding Shan, leave the sword case. You can go down the mountain now. Next scholar, Qin Yu. Qin Yu. Qin Mu was startled as he looked at the youth who had walked out. That youth was extraordinarily handsome and had exquisite features. He had a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, and his face gave Qin Mu a familiar feeling. He looked slightly like Qin Feiyue, Little General Qin. Qin Mu thought to himself. Qi Yu moved forward and carried the sword case on his back before bowing. Taoist Ling Yun smiled. Even though you are from Qin family and they have a huge power and influence in all levels of society, I will not hold back in this examination. Show me your greatest abilities or else you will end up like Ding Shan. Qin Yu replied yes and stretched his hand out to pull out a sword from his back. With a wooden sword in his hand, the other 35 swords flew out at the same time. However, they didn't form the Celestial Dipper sword formation, and instead the swords moved nimbly like swimming dra. Gons. This kind of sword skill wasn't the sword skill taught in primary schools and colleges. Even Taoist Ling Yun had not seen this kind of sword skill before. He only felt these wooden swords were all like swimming dragons, and when these wooden swords formed together, they became a huge dragon which accumulated the powers of all 35 wooden swords, having an extraordinary power. Qin Yu shouted and his vital qi burst forth. His white tiger vital qi suddenly became incomparably vigorous. As his vital qi soaked into the wooden swords, it actually made the wooden swords golden in color, just like they were gold swords. Now, these 36 wooden swords which had surpassed gold and iron attacked to Taoist Ling Yun under his control. Taoist Ling Yun exclaimed in admiration and thought to himself, "This isn't the sword skill of Qin family. It should have resulted from his own fortuitous meeting," and he managed to comprehend the sword skill which had the form of swimming dragons. Even if Qin family didn't send the letter to take care of Qin Yu, he still qualified to become an imperial scholar of our imperial college. Qin Yu had walked the path of the Battle Technique School and the Divine Arts School. His sword skill was like swimming dragons and was very sharp and powerful. The 35 wooden swords flew up over like 35 small dragons, and the wooden swords merged together in 2s and 3s from time to time. It was like a few small dragons combining together to become a big dragon with greater power. Meanwhile, the wooden sword in his hand was even more overbearing. The sword in his hand was like another section of his arm, striking wherever he pointed, and was abnormally tricky. What he used was a very powerful battle technique. Qin Mu was aside and his heart slightly leaped. This Qin Yu has seen a real dragon. That's right, Qin Feiyue had brought the child of Surging River Dragon King that was sealed in the mysterious ice out of great ruins and back to eternal peace. The sword skill of Qin Yu should have been comprehended from that young dragon. Could it be that the young dragon was saved? Other than the young dragon that was pierced through its heart, there was also the Crown Prince's junior protector, Gu Linwan, that was sealed in the mysterious ice as well. Being a Crown Prince's junior protector of the lower first ranking, his ability must be extraordinary, and now that he had cheated him of his junior protector sword as well as the sword sheath that was stolen by Cripple, if Gu Linwan recognized him, he would definitely not let him off. He did not bring junior protector sword with him to the examinations this time, and had left it in Rain Listening Pavilion with Fu Qingyun safeguarding it. After all, junior protector sword was still the sword of a lower first-ranking official. Even though it was missing for years, there will definitely be people who still recognize it. I wonder if Gu Linwan is still the Crown Prince's junior protector. No matter he still is or not, he is not someone I can face. I should find Patriarch first. Qin Yu and Taoist Ling Yun had a marvelous battle. It was a pity there were only 3 moves, and in that 3 moves the two of them had attacked and defended multiple times. After 3 moves, Taoist Ling Yun returned his sword and smiled. "You've passed." Qin Yu let out a sigh of relief and returned the wooden swords back into the sword case before placing it down. Qin Mu frowned slightly. Taoist Ling Yun and Qin Yu's battle looked marvelous, but it gave him a weird feeling. It was as if Taoist Ling Yun had not used all his strength. Qin Yu's moves were indeed very intricate, but his cultivation was not much higher than that Ding Shan earlier. Taoist Ling Yun could have used his dense cultivation to pressure Qin Yu, but instead, he used a sword to fight with the opponent's 36 swords. Wasn't this using one's shortcomings to fight against the opponent's strength? Qin Mu's cultivation was very strong, and furthermore Blind had taught him 9 Heaven's Eye awakening skills, and despite him cultivating only the first heaven, his eyesight was astonishing and could see this point. There's something fishy going on. Next, Qin Mu. Taoist Ling Yun smiled. Qin Mu went forward and was about to carry the sword case when Taoist Ling Yun asked, "Your surname is also Qin?" Qin Mu raised his head and nodded to him. "My surname is Qin." Taoist Ling Yun smiled. "It's a pity that it isn't Qin of the Qin family." Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and didn't carry the sword case. He then gave an inarticulate smile. "Teacher, I'm slightly dumber and I like more. Can I have both sword cases to use?" Taoist Ling Yun thought nothing of it and smiled. "Feel free to use them. I just need a wooden sword." Qin Mu moved the other sword case over as well and placed them beside him. His vital qi flew out, turning into an arm-thick vital qi thread which entered one of the sword cases, and a wooden sword flew out. Taoist Ling Yun broke into laughter. "How did you train? Did your teacher not tell you how to refine your vital qi? To refine qi into thread?" Qin Mu bowed again and smiled honestly. "I have not learned. Teacher, please. Taoist Ling Yun had his hands behind his back while an undetectable fine vital qi thread brought his wooden swords to fly around him as he smiled. You may attack. The fingers on Qin Mu's right hand clutched together to form a sword skill. With his vital qi suddenly bursting forth violently, he took a step forward and the sword skill in his right hand stabbed forward, which was followed by a flick upwards. Kai! Everyone's eardrums were almost exploded from the whistling sound of the wooden swords breaking through the air. Taoist Ling Yun's heart leaped and hurriedly controlled his wooden sword to defend. However, he blocked nothing. It was then followed by Qin Mu's wooden sword flicking upward and he flew into the air. Flick sword form. Qin Mu remained expressionless as his sword fingers continued to stab forward. Just as Taoist Ling Yun was flicked into the air and could make a reaction, that wooden sword had already stabbed him on his chest, blowing him backward. As he crashed through the door of the Great Hall, he vanished without a trace. At the same time, Qin Mu stomped his legs and the two sword cases were jolted 3 feet off the ground. The buckles of the sword cases exploded with a pop as the wooden sword shot out like lightning and stabbed into the Great Hall in one after another. Thud 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 thud. A series of splitting sounds caused by wooden swords stabbing into wooden swords traveled from the inner hall, and in a blink of an eye, the two sword cases were empty as the 71 wooden swords formed a single line. Once the front sword stabbed Taoist Ling Yun's chest and used up all its power, the sword behind would come stabbing and split apart the front sword to continue stabbing Taoist Ling Yun in his heart. As the sword came one after another, there was no time for him to even catch his breath. Thud thud. Beside Qin Mu's legs, the two emptied sword cases fell to the ground and rolled 2 rounds. Behind him was startled scholars that were staring blankly. Even the boy that was under Taoist Ling Yun had also turned his head with his neck twisted at a startling degree. They all had their mouths agape as they looked towards the inner hall speechlessly. Behind Hall of Pure Yang was Imperial College's Hall of Supreme Learning. Hall of Supreme Learning was several times bigger than Hall of Pure Yang. In front of the hall was a long flight of stairs that had 999 steps. On the top of the stairs and in front of the Great Hall was the Saint's Seat, a place that only the Empire's Grand Chancellor could seat. However, at this moment, the one on Saint's Seat wasn't the young patriarch of Heavenly Devil Cult who was also the Empire's Grand Chancellor. It was a middle-aged man that wore a yellow robe on his body and a crown on his head. The young patriarch of Heavenly Devil Cult was seated below him, and below patriarch were hundreds of civil and military court counselors that were standing on the stairs, as well as a directorate. Below the stairs were the scholars of all around the world that were currently in a contest. The scholars that could come here were all divine arts practitioner, and the content of their examination was different from scholars like Qin Mu. The scholars who could come here had all gone through tests that were extremely difficult. When these scholars had reached here after trials and tribulations, some of them fainted and were directly disqualified when they saw the yellow-robed man on Saint's Seat along with such a large disposition. The person on Saint's Seat was exactly the current Eternal Peace Empire Son of Heaven, Emperor Yanfeng. Emperor Yanfeng had personally graced Imperial College, and this wasn't unexpected. Emperor Yanfeng had come here many times to check on the scholars around the world that were seeking knowledge and becoming the students of the Son of Heaven. Imperial College, colleges, and primary schools were weapons for Emperor Yanfeng to confront sects that were deep-rooted. Especially so for Imperial College, which was the most important of them all. There was no way he would not inspect it. Below the stairs, there were numerous scholars competing against one another in a fiery battle when suddenly they heard a loud boom. The back door of Hall of Pure Yang, which was in front of the Hall of Supreme Learning, exploded open, and a figure flew backward and crashed into the battlefield. Closely following behind were wooden swords stabbing towards the figure that was flying backward at an even faster speed. The sword wind whistled and sounds of collisions kept coming through. 71 sounds rang out continuously, and as the swords nailed that figure and smashed him onto the stairs, making him sprawl out on his back. Below Hall of Supreme Learning, there was absolute silence. The scholars that were competing were all in a daze as they stared blankly at the person on the steps. There was also absolute silence in front of Hall of Supreme Learning. The hundreds of civil and military court counselors that were on the stairs were also shocked. After some time, Emperor Yanfeng smiled and said, "Neither too fast nor too slow, Grand Chancellor. It seems like the competitions for the primary school scholars are much more lively than the college scholars." Even the directorate was beaten away. Now I'm interested to see the primary school scholars' competitions. Young Patriarch smiled. If your majesty wants to see it, then we'll call these scholars to come forward and have their competition here. Ling Yun, are you still not getting up? Don't you find it embarrassing enough? Taoist Ling Yun was embarrassed and ashamed. He quickly got up to his feet and apologized to Emperor Yanfeng. There was still a wooden sword stabbed in his chest. This wooden sword was the 72nd one. With 72 swords repeatedly stabbing his chest at the same position, the wooden swords had already stabbed into his muscles and nearly stabbed into his heart. It was lucky he managed to unseal his other divine treasures when he was flying back from the strikes. Only with his magic power regained, he wasn't killed by Qin Mu. However, he had lost face in front of the entire Imperial College and even in front of the Emperor, the court counselors, and all the way to foreign countries. Among the civil and military court counselors, there were a few that were envoys from foreign countries. Emperor Yanfeng smiled. Directorate, you are really capable to actually get beaten like this by a primary school scholar. Who was the one that beat you? Call him up. I want to see who dares to beat a fourth-ranking high official of my imperial court. Taoist Ling Yun became even more ashamed and wanted more than anything to find a hole to tunnel into. Young Patriarch called another directorate over and let him accompany Taoist Ling Yun over. He then smiled and said, Your Majesty, Ling Yun must have underestimated the enemy and let the primary school scholar take the upper hand. However, this primary school scholar's ability is also remarkable. To be able to beat Ling Yun like this, even I am starting to get curious and want to see who has this kind of ability. In front of Hall of Pure Yang, Qin Mu acted as if nothing had happened and turned his head back. He saw that the few scholars behind him still hadn't regained their senses. Only the girl called Si Yunxiang was staring at him with wide eyes, and when she saw him turning back his head, this girl immediately retracted her gaze and lowered her head while rubbing the corners of her clothes. This shy appearance, she's definitely not Granny Si. Qin Mu was full of confidence as he thought to himself. Right at this moment, Taoist Ling Yun quickly walked over with another directorate. That boy immediately welcomed Taoist Ling Yun back by calling out, Teacher, Piak. That boy tumbled from a slap from Taoist Ling Yun, and the other directorate beside him frowned. Senior brother, why do you have to be so petty and vent your anger on a little kid? Taoist Ling Yun had a grim expression as he looked towards Qin Mu with his heart filled with anger that couldn't be quenched. You come with me. The other directorate looked at the other scholars and said, The rest of you follow as well. The examination in Hall of Pure Yang will be temporarily stopped. All the scholars regained their senses and immediately caught up. Everyone came to the bottom of the stairs in front of Hall of Supreme Learning, and their hearts couldn't help pumping violently. None of them knew that there were so many people here, and they were all prestigious figures in the empire. Even the emperor was among them. Qin Mu looked around and exercised restraint in his eyes to look downwards. Wei Yong was also standing under the stairs, but he didn't take any examination. When he saw Qin Mu, he wanted to greet him, but he held it back as he tweaked his ears and scratched his cheeks in frustration. Emperor Yanfeng smiled. Who was the primary school scholar that had blown away my directorate? Let me have a look. Qin Mu took a step forward and raised his head to look directly at the emperor, thinking to himself, This is Emperor Yanfeng, the current emperor of Eternal Peace Empire? Emperor Yanfeng was different from how he imagined him to be. In his imagination, Emperor Yanfeng should be a wise and divine existence, having an awe-inspiring presence like a heavenly god. However, this Emperor Yanfeng looked amiable. He wore a yellow dragon robe on his body and had a red belt embedded with gold and jade. His face was slightly plump and the area between his brows was wide. He had a high nose bridge and had a mustache and beard. The mustache grew above his upper lips and the beard grew below his lower lips, which was much shorter than the mustache above. However, it wasn't too jarring. Someone must have often helped him trim his mustache and beard, thus it was tidy and not messy, looking stylish. Emperor Yanfeng looked at him curiously and smiled. Pretty young, it's really rare for one to have such ability. Where are you from? Qin Mu bowed and wanted to say Lizhou Prefecture when he changed his mind. He replied honestly, I'm from Great Ruins. Just as he said it, a little general suddenly came out from the ranks and bowed. Your Majesty, please give the order to capture this person. He's an abandoned person from Great Ruins. The moment he said it, the whole audiences were instantly in a commotion. Looking towards the source of the sound, Qin Mu was slightly worried. He saw that little general was Qin Feiyue, little general Qin. Qin Feiyue naturally wouldn't be unfamiliar with him. They had not only met once and had even chatted with each other in the inn in Border Dragon City. Qin Feiyue knew some of his background. At this moment, an old minister beside Emperor Yanfeng said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, this little brother here is the Flower Alley Divine Physician that I had found." Flower Alley Divine Physician, so young? Emperor Yanfeng was startled for a moment and smiled. "Step down, little General Qin." He had already said he was from Great Ruin, so why should you be flustered? Qin Feiyue protested. "Your Majesty, this person has a dubious background and is related to Heavenly Devil Cult. Your Majesty, please perceive it." Emperor Yanfeng frowned and said, "Heavenly Devil Cult is also a cult under my rule, and they are also my people. You are now making me take down my own people. Then how am I going to govern Heavenly Devil Cult?" Qin Feiyue still wanted to argue, but Emperor Yanfeng's expression turned slightly grim as he waved his hand. "Step down. Among my court counselors, there are elites from every sect and every cult. Based on their origins, there is half of them that are from devil cults and devil sections. Little General Qin, you are going slightly overboard." Qin Feiyue could only step down. Emperor Yanfeng took a look at Qin Mu and smiled. "Under the whole heaven, every spot is the emperor's ground. To the borders of the land, every individual is the emperor's minister. My lands are not only restricted to eternal peace, even people of great ruins are my people. You're a disciple of Heavenly Devil Cult." Qin Mu bowed and replied, "That's right." Emperor Yanfeng laughed loudly as he looked at the civil and military court counselors at his left and right. Heavenly Devil Cult has always been elusive, and now even their cult's disciples are entered Imperial College to seek knowledge. "Grand Chancellor, you have done a great deed." Young Patriarch bowed. "This is Your Majesty's good fortune." A cabinet minister beside him said, "Your Majesty, this person may be an abandoned person." "Abandoned person?" Emperor Yanfeng was unconcerned and replied leisurely, "For the people abandoned by gods, it doesn't mean that I would also abandon them. Gods can abandon all living things, but I can't. When they come to my land, no matter what their origins are, they are my people. So there's no abandoned person." An old minister went forward and bowed. "But Your Majesty, recently there are sects creating havoc, and I'm afraid that Heavenly Devil Cult is also getting restless. If this person is a spy from Heavenly Devil Cult, these sects of the martial world always wanted to make a big fuss to scare me." Emperor Yanfeng also had a slight headache and sneered. "On the surface, they are rebelling Imperial Preceptor, but they are actually rebelling me. They want me to move my ass and let them sit on the dragon throne. What a wishful thinking. In the past, country depended on sects, and the sects decided who should be the emperor. These sects rested themselves on the country and the common people to suck their blood, killing off any emperor that wasn't to their liking. The present is now different from the past. Sects can only be dependent on the country now." As he said it, it wasn't known which of his heartstring had been moved. As he stood up excitedly, "Imperial Preceptor and I are pushing for a transformation, and it is exactly to change the situation that sects control the lifelines of the common people and country. I don't just want a change, I also want a revolution to change the lives of these sects and to change my life. If these sects don't want to change, they will just have to wait for me to change their lives. The resources that sects control will all belong to the Empire, and they can forget about using coercion against me. Now only the sects need to change, even the Imperial Court has to change. If the Imperial Court doesn't change, sooner or later we'll be done for. You all say Imperial Preceptor is extreme, but he's not as extreme as I am. Imperial Preceptor's actions are following my intentions. Rebelling Imperial Preceptor means to rebel me." The entire Imperial College was absolutely silent, and no sound could be heard. Emperor Yanfeng obviously made the comment out of his own personal feeling, taking the chance to intimidate his ministers. It was also to aggregate the hearts of a ruler and his ministers so that they could work as one. After some time, Emperor Yanfeng revealed a smile and sat back down in his seat. "I've lost my composure. Directorate, bring the name register over." Taoist Ling Yun immediately handed the name register over, and Emperor Yanfeng picked up a vermilion brush and wrote a few words under Qin Mu's name. "From today onwards, He's a student of the Son of Heaven. Once he was done, he closed the register and handed it back to Taoist Ling Yun. Emperor Yanfeng looked at the young patriarch and said, "Grand Chancellor, choosing scholars is originally your job. Now I have taken matters into my own hands and chose for you. What's your opinion?" Young patriarch smiled. "Your Majesty is a brilliant master that has great talent and bold vision. This is the good fortune of great ruins." Emperor Yanfeng laughed out loud and shook his head repeatedly. "Bootlicking, you're bootlicking me again. All right, let the scholars continue their competition." The Directorate of Imperial College received the order and let the numerous scholars continue their competitions. There were still some people that had yet completed their test among the primary school scholars, so they also continued their test in front of Hall of Supreme Learning. Taoist Ling Yun was still the one testing them. Even if Taoist Ling Yun wanted to go easy on the younger generations of those high officials and nobles, he was helpless. After all the participants here now were strong practitioners that had sharp eyes. If he dared to mess around, he would be seen through. This examination lasted all the way to the evening before it ended. There were people elated and people dejected, especially so for college's scholars. Their competitions were even harsher and crueler. Thus the one that could enter Imperial College was 1 in 100. Only 5 places were left for primary school scholars, and the ones that came from prestigious houses were still more learned and excelled the disciples from poor families. Among these 5 scholars, only Si Yunxiang managed to pass the examination and became an imperial scholar of Imperial College. The other 4 people were all from famous families. It wasn't that the scholars from poor family weren't hard-working enough, they were just limited by resources. The martial arts, spells and sword skills taught by all the primary schools and colleges were the same, and no matter how proficient they were, it was impossible for them to break through this barrier. Other than cultivating what primary schools and colleges taught, with experts in their own families guiding them, the heirs of famous families also cultivated their own ultimate arts that were handed down in their families, by their ancestors and even by their sections. That's why the proportion of scholars from poor families entering Imperial College wasn't high. This was all reflected in Qin Mu's eyes, and he thought to himself, if this continues for a long time, the higher-ups in Eternal Peace Empire will always be grasped by the influence of famous families and sections. The disciples of the poor will never have a chance to get out of their predicament, and will never occupy an important position in the imperial court. In this way, the empire will not last long. Emperor Yanfeng has the heart to change. However, I wonder if he could change this situation. In this kind of situation, the rulers would always be the rulers and the hierarchy would solidify. And so some influences would grow more powerful among the rulers, and the bigger they grew, the more resources they would gain, finally becoming malignant tumors in the empire. When the day came, the poor scholars revolted. The malignant tumors would take the chance to stir havoc, and the collapse of the empire could happen in just a night. When the examinations were over, the directorate arranged for their lodgings. Everyone that had become an imperial scholar had their own residence at Imperial College. This place was called Scholars' Residence, the place where scholars stayed. Every scholar had a courtyard with 2 entrances and 2 exits, and the imperial scholars normally lived in their own residence as there was everything they needed there. There were even servants helping them to clean their houses, washing their clothes and preparing meals for them. This way, the scholars wouldn't be vexed by their daily trifles. If they were people who had statuses, they could even bring their own servants or maids over. Qin Mu had nothing at all, so he naturally didn't have any trifles. I wonder if I can bring Hu Linger over too? When I've settled down and seen Patriarch, I'll bring her over. Qin Mu took a look around and discovered that the Jade Mountain which Imperial College was on was much bigger than it seemed. There were mountains on mountains and caves in caves. Other than Hall of Pure Yang, Hall of Azure Yang and Hall of Supreme Learning, there were also about a dozen palace halls of all kinds, and there was also Floor of Heavenly Records. Floor of Heavenly Records was the place where books were stored, having secretaries. As the name implied, secretaries meant to look after the books of secrets. The books stored in Floor of Heavenly Records were the ancient records that the Empire had collected from the sects in this world. These records were looked after by the secretaries. Qin Mu stopped and looked around. He also saw people walking to and fro in Floor of Heavenly Records, which was bustling with activities. Most of them were imperial scholars, and there were also the young generations of the imperial family. How does young cult master feel after coming all the way here? An old voice came from his back and Qin Mu turned around to bow in greeting. Patriarch. The person that had come was the young patriarch. Even though he had an appearance of a youth, his voice was very ancient. He smiled. No need for formalities. Qin Mu composed himself and said, coming all the way here, I've seen Eternal Peace Empire circumstances and that gave me a very huge impact. My heart is in turmoil. Young patriarch became interested and walked forward. Oh, tell me about it. Qin Mu followed his footsteps and talked as he walked. When I came here, I observed along the way. I saw the entire Eternal Peace Empire having the omen of great fortune. Their paths and divine arts are for the everyday use of commoners and develops every day. They summon rain when there's drought and chase the clouds when there's flood, which is close to miracles. There are flying ships in the air, traveling boats on land, and even the arts of pill refinement are used into the everyday life of commoners, creating miracles. Eternal Peace Empire may be in a turmoil now, but it won't last long, and they will become incomparably strong after this. Young patriarch brought him to a lake on the mountain. Standing beside the lake and under the shade of the jade willows, he asked curiously, in your point of view, which has a more promising future, a sect or a country? From what you said, you believe that a sect can never be a match for a country. Qin Mu nodded his head. Primary schools, colleges, and Imperial College have confirmed that Eternal Peace Empire is the biggest sect in the world. The other sects are all just primary schools and colleges for this sect, merely providing scholars for Eternal Peace Empire. How could these sects fight against Eternal Peace Empire? Young patriarch sat down and on the shore were 2 sets of fishing rods. He gave Qin Mu one and took one for himself. He then threw a fish bait into the water and smiled. However, now the whole country is in rebellion. Many sects took this chance to revolt. A spark can cause a forest fire, and with Imperial Preceptor getting severely injured, I see Eternal Peace Empire approaching a crisis and the Empire may perish anytime. Qin Mu also threw the fishing line and bait into the water, laughing involuntarily. Patriarch, you're trying to mislead me, right? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is loosening the reins only to grasp them better. He wants to take this chance to capture all rebelling powers in the world in one fell swoop. This point didn't elude me, thus it naturally couldn't hide from Patriarch. The young patriarch had a calm expression as he looked at the surface of the lake. After a while he said, it's not just loosening the reins to grasp them better. You missed out the trick of injuring himself to gain the enemy's confidence. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was indeed severely damaged and suffered serious injuries. Or else he wouldn't be able to trick all the sects in the world. Qin Mu was shocked and cried out, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor injured himself? Young patriarch shook his head. It was someone else who had injured him. It is said that 3 old monsters from my generation had attacked together and severely injured him. I had visited him after he had returned to the capital city, and he was indeed heavily injured. Qin Mu was stumped for words. He had always thought Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was using the loosening reins method to lure the rebelling forces out. Never did he expect Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was really injured. He beat them at their own game and used this to lure these people out. Young Patriarch continued, neither too fast nor too slow. If these sects think that they could get rid of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor in this way and ruin Eternal Peace Empire, they are probably going to suffer losses. Young Cult Master, what's your opinion on Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor? Qin Mu replied in awe. Hero among men, broad-minded and open, an incomparable talent. Young Patriarch revealed a smile. When he came to me to ask the way then, I had also thought so. I had originally wanted to take him as my disciple, but his vast talent already had the tendency to vaguely surpass me. Therefore I had dropped this thought so as not to hold him back. Now Eternal Peace Empire is above all the sects, schools and cults in the world. Their forces are matchless, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is also an incomparable talent. In that case, how can our sacred cult settle down? There was the intention to test him in his words. Ever since the first sentence he had said after meeting Qin Mu, he had already started his test on Qin Mu. Attending Imperial College's examinations and becoming an Imperial Scholar of Imperial College was only the first test on Qin Mu, which tested his strength. And now he was testing his wisdom. If he had the wisdom to manage Heavenly Devil Cult, and if he had the wisdom to become a cult master. Qin Mu contemplated for a moment and said, "There are two paths for our sacred cult. The first path is to transform the cult into a country, to let our sacred cult found a country. If our sacred cult found a country, we must leave far away from eternal peace. As the fate of Eternal Peace Empire becomes increasingly prosperous, Imperial Preceptor will definitely move his troops outside to swallow up the neighboring territories after he quells the rebellion. In the Empire, we'll be unable to contend against Eternal Peace Empire, and if we are too close, we'll also be unable to contend against Eternal Peace Empire. If we leave far away from Eternal Peace, there's no foundation for our sacred cult, and I'm afraid it would be hard for us to pick up even after dozens of years." Young Patriarch nodded his head and said, "The first path is incomparably difficult. Our sacred cult is based on the common people. Leaving eternal peace means that our foundation would be ruined. This path is infeasible. What's the second path?" "The second path is to depend on," Qin Mu continued, "the sacred cult dependent on Eternal Peace Empire." Young Patriarch's expression changed slightly and he laughed coldly. "You being the cult master is to exterminate our sacred cult? How dare you, off with your head!" Qin Mu was bewildered. Patriarch didn't have this thought? The young Patriarch fell silent for a moment and sighed. "Yes, I did. Put your head temporarily on your neck, and continue your words." Qin Mu continued, "I see that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's path somewhat conforms with our sacred cult's teaching, the path of the saint, which is for the everyday use of commoners. If our sacred cult depends on eternal peace, we won't decline like the other sects and could instead expand and grow stronger. This is the first point." He paused for a while and continued, "Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's primary schools, colleges, and Imperial College have a drawback, and it is huge. It can't be seen in a short period of time, but after 200 to 300 years, the result will become apparent." The young Patriarch revealed a curious look and asked, "What's the drawback?" Qin Mu asked, "May I dare to ask, Patriarch, how many % of the scholars in Imperial College are from poor families?" The young Patriarch revealed a smile as he obviously knew what he was implying. He replied, 10%. Qin Mu asked again, "Over these years, how many % of the young officials in Eternal Peace Empire come from Imperial College?" The young Patriarch replied, 72% are from Imperial College. The other old ministers are from various big sects, and there are also some that have climbed up step by step. From my speculation, 200 years later, all the officials in the world would come from Imperial College, and there will be no scholars from poor families in Imperial College." Qin Mu saw his float sinking downwards and didn't hurry to pull back his rod. Instead, he waited for a while. 200 years later, children from poor families would remain poor for their entire lives, and children from rich families would remain rich for their entire lives. The people's resentment would accumulate over the days and months, which will surely explode. The rich and influential families would take this chance to revolt and overthrow the imperial family, and that would be the time our sacred cult would rule the world. With our surging power, no one would be a match for us and no one could resist us. He raised his rod and a huge fish was hooked. However, this fish was extremely strong and the fishing line snapped. The huge fish plopped back into the water and vanished without a trace. The young Patriarch laughed coldly. "You want to rebel and frame our sacred cult as unrighteous? Off with your head." Qin kept quiet for a moment and said, "Patriarch, stop joking." The young Patriarch became speechless. He had also caught a fish, but it was a small one. Lifting his rod up, he continued, "All right, we'll take about proper matters. What happens after you turn our sacred cult into another Eternal Peace Empire after 200 years? When a huge battle wipes clean eternal peace and destroys the powerful families, there will be powerful families 200 years later, which would overthrow the rule of our sacred cult. How would you solve it?" Qin Mu was stumped and shook his head. "I haven't thought about what would happen after 200 years. May Patriarch enlighten me." The young Patriarch broke a willow branch and speared the fish. He then stood up. "Even I can't see what would happen after 200 years. Young cult master, since you can see 200 years ahead at your age, you are already a qualified cult master. You've passed my test. My thinking is different from yours. What I'm thinking is the teachings of our sacred cult." Qin Mu's heart jolted slightly as he looked towards this young elder. The young Patriarch said unhurriedly, "The path of the saint is none other than the everyday use for common people. Anyone who does otherwise is considered heresy. To act straightforwardly, to follow the course of nature, that's the meaning of path. When Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor rose abruptly, I had detected his great ambition. When he asked me about the path, I had told him this sentence in great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. What he is doing now is the essence of this sentence. Qin Mu's heart and mind wavered and he bowed in awe. Patriarch is wise and is already a saint. You wish to make an imperceptible influence and turn Eternal Peace Empire in our sacred cult. If Eternal Peace Empire is able to achieve the path of the saint, Eternal Peace Empire would be Heavenly Saint Cult. The young patriarch shook his head. Eternal Peace Empire and Imperial Preceptor can't achieve the path of the saint and neither could I. Just like you said, the power and resources would be in the hands of powerful families 200 years later. The poor will become poorer and the rich will become richer. This isn't the path of the saint of our Heavenly Saint Cult. I wanted to influence Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Eternal Peace Empire. However, it looks like I had already failed. I'm old, this responsibility would be passed on to you. All I can help you is to manage the cult for you for another few more years. He held the fish in his hand and carried the poles on his back. Qin Mu followed behind him and saw this elder finding a call to set up a pot in the paramount sacred place of everyone's heart in Eternal Peace Empire. Adding water and starting a fire, he removed the scales and organs of the fish before throwing it into the pot. Looking at the water in the pot, young patriarch took out some seasonings and sprinkled them into the pot. Another few months later, I'll retire from the position of Grand Chancellor. I'm old and I want to spend my last few years traveling. There are still many places in this world I have yet to explore and the sacred cult would be in your hands. After I retire, I will hold an ascension ceremony and personally see you become the cult master of the sacred cult. Qin Mu was slightly troubled and asked, I'm currently only at 5 elements realm. For me to directly take over the sacred cult, would it be too early and hard to convince the masses? Young patriarch signaled him to sit down. Qin Mu sat down with legs crossed in front of the pot and smelt the fragrance of the fish soup. Young patriarch replied, the sacred cult is actually more dispersed. All 360 hall masters are spread throughout the land and our followers are all over Eternal Peace. Even the elders and the heavenly kings are hard to gather together. You can be a cult master that washes his hands of his responsibility. If this really doesn't work out, ain't I still alive? When I'm still alive, no one would dare to touch you, not even Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Qin Mu's heart slightly wavered and tried to ask, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor should be trying to control our sacred cult, am I right? Of course he does. However, you can make him be at ease. Young patriarch tasted the fish soup and felt that the heat wasn't there yet, so he added more firewood. You need to know that you are still young and have a low cultivation. He won't put you in his eyes and will feel that he can control you. If he could achieve the path of the saint, there's nothing to lose by letting him control you and control the sacred cult. If he can't do it, you will just have to replace him. It was as if he was saying an insignificant matter. However, this matter was a major event that involved an interregnum between 2 dynasties. Qin Mu tasted the fish soup and felt that it was delicious and very refreshing, making him can't help exclaiming in admiration. Suddenly he remembered a thing and immediately asked, Patriarch, is there a technique missing in Great Education Heavenly Devil Scriptures? After studying it for these few days, I didn't find a technique which could unify all skills in Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. Young patriarch stretched his hand and grabbed towards the air and got 2 bowls and a ladle from God knows where. Qin Mu took over the ladle and started to ladle out the soup. Just now young patriarch grabbed towards the air. This kind of spell was recorded in Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures. It was called 5 Ghost Transport Spell. To be able to steal things from far away without anyone knowing. The unity technique of Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scripture is only imparted to the cult master, and is passed down from cult master to cult master. The young patriarch drank a mouth of fish soup and heaved a sigh. The content in Great Educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures can all be imparted out except for the unity technique that only the cult master could cultivate. When you become the sacred cult master, Li Tianqing would impart it to you. Qin Mu stared blankly. Wasn't cult master Li Tianqing already dead? From the young patriarch's tone, Li Tianqing seemed to still be alive. Drinking the fish soup, he found it more and more delicious, so he asked, "Patriarch, what fish is this?" The young patriarch replied, "The chi of the 9 dragons gathered here and formed this lake. These fish here absorb the dragon chi, therefore, they are called 9 dragons carp. This kind of fish has a body full of hard bones and not much meat, therefore they could only be used for simmering, and the soup simmered from them are especially delicious." Qin Mu looked pensive. "Patriarch means to let me become a 9 dragons carp with a body full of hard bones?" The young patriarch gave him a stare. "Aren't you thinking too much? What's so bad about being a human that you want to become a fish? Do you want to get simmered in soup?" "I'm just craving for fish soup, that's why I had brought you here." Qin Mu was embarrassed. It seemed that the old man really was craving and just wanted to drink fish soup. The two of them sat down and slowly drank the soup, enjoying it very much. Qin Mu picked out a fishbone and drew a picture on the ground. He drew out the 6 fusion realm circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir Body and asked, "Patriarch, I have seen this circulation diagram in Hall of Azure Yang. However, there isn't a preceding diagram. Can I ask if Patriarch had seen the preceding diagram of this picture?" The young patriarch looked at it carefully and was astonished. "What do you need this circulation diagram of this technique for? You recognize this technique?" Qin Mu nodded his head and said, "This is the 6 fusion realm circulation diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique." The young patriarch had a weird expression. "Even I don't know this is Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Who told you so?" "Village chief did." The young patriarch stared blankly for a moment and sighed ruefully. "This old fellow is still wiser than me. I can't recognize this technique and didn't know its name, but he did. He's still the smarter one. So this technique is called Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. That old fellow indeed has lots of experience and knowledge." I had seen this circulation diagram in an ancient ruin. Other than this picture, there are also a few incomplete pictures. I saw the myriads of marvels in the circulation of the diagrams, which were extraordinary. Therefore I had memorized them down and carved them in Hall of Azure Yang. The techniques in Hall of Azure Yang are all incomplete diagrams, and this is one of the incomplete ones. He paused for a moment and asked, "You are cultivating this technique?" Qin Mu nodded his head. "I had cultivated Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique since I was a child." The young patriarch hesitated for a moment. "By rights, you should be cultivating the unity technique of our sacred cult, but there must be a reason why that old fellow in your village made you cultivate this Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. With his profound knowledge, he didn't teach you his technique, and instead taught you Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. This means it's even better than his technique. Good techniques often have points in common. Why don't you cultivate both techniques? It might even contribute to your cultivation." Qin Mu understood and replied, "I haven't found the preceding diagram of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Without the technique of 5 elements realm, I can't continue cultivating."